Get him out, the CEO said, her voice cutting through the frozen demo room. Bring in real experts. The word struck Ethan Walker harder than the room's silence ever could, but he did not flinch. He stood beside the stalled Astra 9 medical robot with a coil of cable in one hand and a maintenance badge clipped to his shirt, the kind of badge people read once and then stopped seeing the man behind it. Around him, Bennett Robotics was holding its breath. The demo floor gleamed under white ceiling lights. Glass walls reflected the pale faces of investors who had flown into Columbus for the most important presentation in the company's history. $600 million waited behind those suits, behind those quiet phones, behind every polished smile that was beginning to crack. Astra 9 stood motionless in the center of the room, one robotic arm suspended above a training table, its sensors glowing amber, its central display pulsing with warning colors no one wanted to explain. Martin Hayes, the operations director, stepped forward with a tight smile meant for executives and a sharper one meant for men like Ethan. Miss Bennett, we cannot let a night maintenance worker improvise on our flagship system. Ethan looked at the robot, not at Martin. It is not the arm, he said quietly. It is the safety handshake between the AI layer and the central controller. A few engineers glanced at one another. Martin laughed under his breath. He fixes lights and loose floor panels. Now he is diagnosing artificial intelligence. Ethan's voice stayed level. The robot is refusing to continue because the system was taught to skip a confirmation step. It is protecting the patient model from a bad command. Claire Bennett, 28 years old and carrying the weight of an empire she had inherited too young, turned toward him with cold focus. Are you saying my engineering team forced an unsafe shortcut? I am saying the machine stopped because someone told it to pretend it was ready. The room changed. Not loudly. Just enough. The hum of the lights seemed sharper. The investors behind the glass leaned closer. Martin's jaw tightened, and for one brief second, fear crossed his face before pride covered it. This is absurd, he said. We have a contract deadline at 9 tomorrow morning. We need certified specialists, not janitorial poetry. Claire looked from Martin to Ethan, then to the unmoving robot. Her decision came fast, because pressure often disguises speed as leadership. Remove him from the control station, she said. Call Pierce, Cole, and Reed. I want the best in the country here before sunrise. Ethan slowly set the cable down. No argument. No plea. No performance of wounded pride. He only looked at the large wall monitor as Martin pulled up the emergency expert list. Dr. Nolan Pierce. Vanessa Cole. Samuel Reed. 3 names appeared in clean corporate type, 3 names the room treated like salvation. Ethan's hand stilled near his toolbox. Years ago, those 3 had sat in the front row of his safety systems class, taking notes while he taught them never to trade human protection for applause. Martin smirked. See, Walker. That is what real expertise looks like. Ethan lowered his eyes, quiet as ever. But for the first time that night, the man they were replacing knew something no one else did. The experts coming to save Bennett Robotics had learned how to save it from him. By the time Ethan Walker reached his apartment on the east side of Columbus, the city had gone quiet in the way only midnight can make a working neighborhood quiet. Porch lights glowed over wet sidewalks. A freight train sounded somewhere beyond the river. His old pickup clicked as the engine cooled in the parking lot, and for a moment, he sat with both hands on the steering wheel, letting the words from the demo room fade into the dark. Get him out. Bring in real experts. He had heard worse in his life, but humiliation changes shape when you have a child waiting at home. It stops being about your pride and starts becoming a question you hope they never ask. Inside the apartment, Mrs. Alvarez from next door had left the hallway lamp on. She tried to stay awake, the older woman whispered, handing him Abigail's small backpack. Had that robot thing on the kitchen table again. Ethan thanked her, paid her with cash folded twice, and stepped into the apartment as softly as a man can step when life already feels too loud. Abigail Walker was asleep at the kitchen table, one cheek resting beside a little robot made from cereal boxes, tape, bottle caps, and a flashlight bulb that no longer worked. Her pencil was still in her hand. Ethan stood there for a long second, looking at her. 8 years old, too curious for the world to stay simple, too kind for him to keep pretending silence did not cost anything. He slipped off his work jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She stirred. "Daddy? I am here, sweetheart." Did the robot work? Ethan looked toward the window, where rain slid down the glass in thin silver lines. "Not tonight." "Did they listen to you?" He smiled, but it did not reach all the way to his eyes. "Not yet." Abigail sat up, blinking sleep away. "Why do people at work not know you are smart?" The question was small, but it found the old wound without trying. Ethan pulled out the chair beside her and sat down. The apartment smelled faintly of macaroni, dish soap, and the lavender detergent he bought because Abigail said it made the blankets feel less lonely. On the counter sat unpaid bills beneath a magnet shaped like a sunflower. Near the refrigerator, a framed photo of his late wife, Hannah, caught the soft yellow light. "Because some people only read the name tag," Ethan said gently. "They do not always take time to know the man wearing it." Abigail studied him like she was deciding whether that answer was fair. "Mom would have told them." Ethan looked down at his hands, still marked with grease from a system he had not been allowed to save. "Your mom believed truth had a way of finding the room eventually." He helped Abigail to bed, tucked the blanket around her, and waited until her breathing slowed again. Then he returned to the kitchen and opened the bottom drawer beneath the stack of old manuals. Inside was a metal badge he had not worn in years, Walker Systems Safety Instructor. He touched it once, then started to close the drawer. But Abigail's robot model slipped from the table and nudged an old cardboard box under the chair. The lid shifted open. From inside, a photograph slid halfway out. It showed Ethan years younger, standing before a classroom of engineers. In the front row were Nolan Pierce and Vanessa Cole, smiling like students who had just learned from the best man in the room. The next morning, Bennett Robotics looked nothing like a company in trouble. The lobby smelled of fresh coffee and polished stone. Sunlight poured through the high glass entrance, turning the floor bright enough to hide the fear beneath everyone's shoes. Employees gathered along the demo corridor, whispering with the nervous excitement people use when they want to believe authority has arrived. At 8:10, the elevator doors opened, and the experts walked in. Dr. Nolan Pierce came first, carrying a black diagnostic case and the quiet confidence of a man whose name opened doors before he touched the handle. Vanessa Cole followed, sharp-eyed and composed, a tablet tucked beneath one arm. Samuel Reed stepped in behind them, younger, focused, already scanning the building like a problem to be solved. Claire Bennett met them near the glass wall with Martin Hayes at her side. "Thank you for coming on short notice," she said. "Astra 9 must be stable before the investor demonstration." Martin gave the staff a practiced smile. "We now have the best in the country on site." Applause moved through the corridor, quick and relieved. Ethan heard it from the back of the room while coiling cables beside the control station. Martin had assigned him there before sunrise, not because the cables mattered, but because humiliation often dresses itself as logistics. "Walker," Martin called, loud enough for the nearest employees to hear. "Keep the floor clean and stay clear of the diagnostic table." Ethan nodded once. No bitterness. No reply. He had learned that dignity sometimes meant letting a small man enjoy a small victory until the truth grew larger than both of them. Nolan opened his case beside the control console. "Show me the last failure sequence," he said. Vanessa connected her tablet. Samuel checked the sensor array along Astra 9's shoulder joint. For a while, the room filled with professional rhythm, quiet commands, soft beeps, rolling chairs, clipped technical phrases, the faint hum of the robot waiting under white light. Claire watched from behind the glass, arms folded, trying not to look at the clock. Martin stood beside her, smiling whenever an investor glanced over. Ethan worked in silence near the rear wall, gathering cables into neat loops. Then Nolan looked up. His gaze moved past Samuel, past the suspended robotic arm, past the polished executives, and stopped on Ethan. The diagnostic stylus slipped slightly in his fingers. Vanessa noticed the shift and followed his eyes. Her face changed too, not dramatically, but deeply, like someone seeing a ghost who had chosen not to haunt anyone. Samuel turned last, and the confidence on his face gave way to stunned recognition. Ethan met their eyes from across the room. For one heartbeat, the years folded in on themselves, a training classroom, a whiteboard full of safety logic, 3 young engineers learning from the man now standing with cable dust on his sleeve. Nolan took half a step forward. "Sir." The word was soft, almost swallowed by the machines, but Vanessa heard it. Samuel heard it. Claire, watching through the glass, saw all 3 experts go still. Ethan raised one finger gently to his lips. "Not now. Not here. Not for pride." The room kept moving around them, unaware that the experts brought in to replace him had just recognized their teacher. By 9:15, the experts had made Astra 9 move again, and for exactly 11 seconds, the room believed the problem had been solved. The robotic arm lowered toward the patient model with careful precision. The sensors shifted from amber to soft green. Someone behind the glass let out a relieved breath. Martin Hayes smiled as if he had personally engineered the recovery. Then Astra 9 stopped again. Not slowly. Not dramatically. It simply froze above the training table, refusing to continue, its joints locked in a posture of perfect disobedience. The green light faded back to amber. The room fell into the kind of silence that makes expensive equipment sound louder. Nolan Pierce leaned over the console, eyes narrowing. "Run the sequence again." Vanessa Cole reviewed the logs. Samuel Reed checked the shoulder array. They replaced a module, reset the motion path, cleared sensor warnings, and restarted the protocol. Astra 9 moved 5 inches, paused, then stopped in the exact same place. Claire Bennett looked at the clock. Investors would return in less than an hour. "Tell me what is happening," she said. Nolan exhaled slowly. "The hardware is responding." Vanessa added, "The motion system is not the source." Samuel frowned at the data. "Something upstream is rejecting execution." From the back of the control room, Ethan set a neatly coiled cable on a shelf. He had been watching the robot, not the screen. "It is refusing the command because the safety layer does not believe the permission is honest." Martin turned sharply. "No one asked you, Walker." Ethan kept his voice low. "The confirmation step was bypassed, but the downstream protection still remembers it should exist." "That is nonsense." "No," Vanessa said before she could stop herself. The room turned toward her. She stared at the log, her face changed by recognition. "It is not nonsense." Nolan leaned closer to her tablet. His expression tightened. Samuel looked from the console to Ethan and back again. Martin's smile vanished. Claire noticed every shift. She had spent years in boardrooms learning that people often told the truth first with their eyes. "Explain," she said. Vanessa hesitated, then spoke carefully. "This pattern resembles an old training scenario. A fail-safe conflict where speed commands are accepted at the surface level but rejected by a deeper human protection rule." Ethan looked down. Martin stepped between them. "We are not discussing academic exercises. We are discussing a live product demonstration." Ethan's eyes lifted, calm but clear. "That is the problem. Someone treated a live system like a demonstration mattered more than the patient model." The words landed harder than blame because they were not emotional. They were precise. Claire turned to Martin. "Did operations alter the safety sequence for demo speed?" "Absolutely not," he said too quickly. Nolan and Vanessa exchanged a glance. It was small, but not small enough. Claire saw it. Martin saw her seeing it. The room tightened around the lie. Astra 9 remained motionless, its amber light steady, as if the machine itself had chosen dignity over applause. Claire Bennett did not confront Martin in front of the investors. Not yet. She had learned that some truths needed quiet space before they could survive a loud room. While Nolan, Vanessa, and Samuel continued reviewing Astra 9's frozen sequence, Claire stepped into the corridor behind the demo floor, where the glass walls softened the noise of machines into a distant hum. That was where she saw Ethan Walker sitting on a low bench beneath an emergency light, holding his phone in one hand and a tiny roll of clear tape in the other. On the screen, Abigail sat at their kitchen table with her cereal box robot tilted on its side. "The arm keeps falling off," she said. Ethan smiled gently. "Then we do not force it to move faster. We ask why it is not ready." Abigail pressed the tape against cardboard. "Like your work robot?" Ethan glanced toward the demo room door. "A good robot is not the fastest robot, sweetheart. A good robot knows when to stop if a person could be hurt." Claire paused in the hallway. The sentence was simple enough for a child and strong enough to shame an entire company. Abigail's voice grew smaller. "Did they laugh at you again?" Ethan looked down at the phone, and for the first time that day, the calm in his face became something softer, something tired. "They laughed at what they thought I was," he said. "That is not the same as knowing me." Claire felt those words settle somewhere she had kept guarded since becoming chief executive officer at 28. People thought they knew her too. Too young. Too polished. Too protected by a family name. She had spent years proving she belonged in rooms where men twice her age waited for her to blink first. But in doing so, she had started measuring people the way the room measured her, title first, soul later. Ethan ended the call with a quiet promise to be home for dinner if he could. He sat for a moment afterward, phone resting in his hands, the blue light fading from his face. Claire stepped forward. He stood immediately, not startled, only respectful. "Miss Bennett. Your daughter understands safety systems better than half my leadership team," she said. Ethan almost smiled. "She understands people. Machines are easier after that." The corridor fell quiet. Through the glass, Astra 9 stood frozen beneath white lights while experts moved around it like surgeons around a patient that would not trust them. Claire looked back at Ethan. "Who taught you safety systems?" His expression closed, not rudely, but like a door someone had knocked on too many years too late. "A few good people." "That is not an answer. It is the safest one." Claire studied him, hearing the weight beneath the words. "Mr. Walker, Nolan Pierce nearly called you sir in my demo room. Vanessa Cole looked at you like she had found a missing chapter. Samuel Reed stopped talking when he saw your face. So I will ask again. Who are you really?" Ethan looked through the glass at Astra 9, at the amber light still refusing to turn green. Someone who learned the hard way that applause can be dangerous when it comes before readiness. Before Claire could respond, Vanessa appeared at the corridor door, pale and holding her tablet against her chest. "Miss Bennett," she said carefully, eyes flicking to Ethan. "We need to talk about the original Walker failsafe problem." Vanessa did not say the words loudly, but they changed the air around Claire Bennett. The original Walker failsafe problem. Ethan looked down at the polished corridor floor as if the past had just stepped out of an elevator wearing an old name tag. Claire turned to Vanessa. "You know him?" Vanessa swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." Nolan Pierce appeared behind her with Samuel Reed, both men carrying the same careful shame in their faces. Nolan looked at Ethan first, not at Claire, not at Martin, not at the investors beyond the glass. "He was our instructor," Nolan said. The corridor went still. "Not a consultant. Not a maintenance worker. Our instructor." Samuel added quietly, the best one we ever had." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he did not correct them. He did not ask for the words. That was why they mattered. Vanessa held out her tablet, showing Claire a training archive with old class photos, safety diagrams, and certification records. "Walker Systems Safety Lab," she said. "Emergency robotics, medical automation, crisis response protocols." He trained engineers to stop intelligent machines from completing unsafe commands just because an executive deadline demanded completion. Claire looked at Ethan, and the man in the maintenance badge suddenly seemed less like a mystery and more like an indictment of her own company. "Why are you working nights in my building?" she asked. Ethan's answer came slowly. "Because after my wife died, I needed steady hours, health insurance, and a job close enough to pick up my daughter from school." Nolan's voice softened. "That is not why you left the field." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. No, the truth rose without drama, and somehow that made it heavier. Years earlier, Ethan had refused to certify a medical robotics demo that had skipped a safety confirmation layer to meet an investor deadline. He warned that a machine trained to ignore one human protection rule could learn to ignore others. The company moved forward anyway. When the demo failed publicly, leadership needed someone quiet enough to blame and principled enough not to fight dirty. Ethan would not sign the false report. He would not trade safety for applause. So they buried his name, stripped his access, and let the industry believe he had been difficult, unstable, too cautious. Martin Hayes had been the operations executive who signed the replacement certification. Claire's face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough for Nolan to step back. "Martin knew?" she asked. Ethan said nothing. Vanessa answered for him. Martin benefited. Claire walked fast to the executive console outside the demo room and opened Ethan's personnel file. Maintenance technician, night shift, limited clearance, non-engineering support. Then she found the hiring notes buried 3 folders deep. Reassigned to low-risk facilities role. Do not route to safety systems. Approved by Martin Hayes. Behind them, Martin appeared at the corridor entrance, his polished smile gone thin. "Claire, whatever they are implying, this is old industry politics." She turned toward him with a calm that felt colder than anger. "You put one of the leading safety instructors in the country on night maintenance and hit him from my engineering division." Martin lifted both hands, palms open, harmless in appearance and desperate underneath. "I protected the company from liability." Ethan finally looked at him. "No, Martin. You protected the lie that made you useful." No one spoke. Through the glass, Astra 9 stood frozen in amber light, waiting for someone honest enough to let it stop pretending. Martin Hayes did not raise his voice. Men like him rarely did when a room was full of people trained to confuse calm with honesty. He stepped through the corridor door with a folder in one hand and a wounded expression carefully arranged on his face. "Before everyone rewrites history," he said, "there is a current issue we need to address." Claire Bennett turned slowly. Ethan remained beside the glass, still and quiet. Nolan, Vanessa, and Samuel stood near him, no longer like outside experts, but like former students who had remembered where their standards came from. Martin placed the folder on the console. The maintenance logs show an override entered during Ethan Walker's shift. That override preceded the Astra 9 failure. "I did not want to say this publicly, but if Mr. Walker had prior knowledge of the system, he may have created the appearance of a crisis to make himself necessary." The words moved through the corridor like cold water. Vanessa's eyes flashed. "That is not what happened." Martin looked at her with practiced disappointment. "You are emotionally compromised by your past connection to him." Claire said, "Enough." But the damage had already started. Through the glass, employees whispered. Investors looked toward Ethan. A man who had been invisible all morning was suddenly visible for the worst possible reason. Ethan did not defend himself with noise. He had learned that lies wanted volume because truth could afford patience. Then the elevator chimed. Abigail Walker stepped into the lobby holding her backpack against her chest and the old cardboard box from the kitchen tucked beneath one arm. Mrs. Alvarez hurried behind her, breathless and apologetic. "I am sorry," she said. "The school dismissed early for a water main issue, and she insisted her father was here." Ethan's composure shifted for the first time. Not because of Martin. Not because of the accusation. Because his daughter was now standing in a room where grown people were turning his name into something ugly. Abigail looked through the glass and saw her father. Then she heard a young employee whisper, "That is the maintenance guy who broke the robot." Her face changed. Small. Confused. Hurt in a way no child should have to carry. Ethan crossed the corridor quickly, then stopped himself, softening before he reached her. He knelt on one knee so he would not tower over her. "Hey, sweetheart." "Daddy," she whispered, "did you break it?" The question did not accuse him. It trusted him enough to ask. Ethan took a breath. Around them, the company waited. Martin waited. Claire watched with her hand still resting on the folder. "No," Ethan said gently. "But some people are afraid of what the truth will fix." Abigail looked past him at Martin, then at the experts. "They said you did something bad." Ethan touched the strap of her backpack, steadying both of them. "Listen to me. The truth does not get louder because people lie. It only needs someone brave enough to keep holding it." Abigail's eyes filled, but she nodded. Then she opened the cardboard box. Inside were old photographs, folded certificates, and the metal instructor badge Ethan had tried to hide from the world. She pulled out the classroom photo from years earlier and walked straight to Claire. Her small hands trembled, but her voice did not. "My dad taught them," she said, pointing to Nolan, Vanessa, and Samuel in the front row of the picture. "He is not pretending." Claire accepted the photo as if it weighed more than the folder Martin had brought. Nolan stepped closer, his voice low and firm. "She is right." Vanessa stood beside him. "He trained us." Samuel added, "And he warned us about exactly this kind of shortcut." The corridor went silent. Martin's accusation remained on the console, neat and polished, but suddenly it looked like paper trying to stand against a wall of truth. Claire Bennett did not move for several seconds. She held Abigail's photograph in one hand and Martin Hayes's accusation folder in the other, and the difference between them felt almost holy. One was polished, prepared, and designed to protect a powerful man. The other was worn at the corners, carried by a child, and heavy with a truth no one had bothered to ask for. Through the glass, Astra 9 remained frozen under the demo lights, amber sensors glowing like a quiet warning. Investors gathered behind the partition. Employees stood still along the corridor. The experts waited, not for permission to speak anymore, but for courage to be honored. Claire turned first to Nolan Pierce. "Say it in front of everyone." Nolan stepped into the demo room, his diagnostic case still open on the table. His voice was steady, but there was emotion under it. "Ethan Walker trained me in human safety systems." Vanessa Cole stood beside him. "He taught us that a machine smart enough to act must also be wise enough to stop." Samuel Reed nodded. "He warned us never to trade patient protection for speed, applause, or investor comfort." The room fell completely silent. Martin opened his mouth, but no sentence came out clean. Claire placed his folder flat on the console. "Mr. Hayes, step away from the system." "Claire, you are making a mistake." "No," she said. "I made one when I removed the only person in this building who understood what the robot was trying to protect." She turned to Ethan. For the first time since he had entered Bennett Robotics in a maintenance shirt, she did not look at the badge. She looked at the man. "Mr. Walker, can you restore the original rule set?" Ethan glanced at Abigail. She stood near Mrs. Alvarez, holding the cardboard box with both hands, eyes shining but brave. He looked at Nolan, Vanessa, and Samuel, his former students now standing like witnesses to a life someone tried to erase. Then he looked at Claire. "Yes," he said. "But it will be slower than the demo you wanted." Claire's answer came without hesitation. "Then we will show them the truth slowly." Ethan stepped to the control station. No speech. No revenge. No triumphant glance toward Martin. He only rolled up his sleeves and began working. Nolan cleared the console. Vanessa pulled the safety archive. Samuel brought up the sensor map. The old classroom seemed to return for a moment, not with desks or whiteboards, but with discipline, respect, and the quiet rhythm of people doing the right thing in the right order. Ethan restored the original safety handshake, removed the forced speed override, and rebuilt the confirmation layer Martin had treated like an inconvenience. Astra 9's amber light blinked once. Twice. Then softened to green. Claire stood beside Abigail now, both of them watching as Ethan initiated the sequence. The robotic arm lowered toward the patient model, slower than before, steadier than before, pausing at every checkpoint as if asking permission from conscience itself. It completed the task, lifted away, and then stopped exactly where it should, protecting the model instead of rushing past it. No one clapped. Not at first. The silence was too deep, too full, too deserved. Ethan looked at the machine, then at his daughter. Abigail smiled through tears. And across the room, the experts brought in to replace him stood behind their teacher. The silence after Astra 9 completed the sequence lasted longer than applause ever could. It reached the investors behind the glass, the engineers along the wall, the assistants holding tablets, and every employee who had watched a maintenance badge become smaller than the man wearing it. The robotic arm rested above the patient model in perfect stillness, not frozen this time, but finished. Safe. Honest. Human enough to stop. Claire Bennett stepped forward slowly, the morning light cutting through the demo room windows and softening the cold shine of the machines. She looked at Ethan Walker first, then at Abigail, then at Nolan, Vanessa, and Samuel standing behind him with the quiet loyalty of students who had finally been allowed to name their teacher. "Before this demonstration continues," Claire said, her voice clear across the room, "Bennett Robotics owes an apology." No one shifted. Even Martin Hayes stood motionless near the console, his polished certainty gone. Claire turned toward the investors. "I removed a man from this room because I believed his title told me his value. I was wrong. Ethan Walker understood this system because he helped build the standards our experts still follow." Nolan lowered his head, not in shame, but in respect. Vanessa placed a hand over the old photograph Abigail had brought. Samuel stepped slightly behind Ethan, as if standing where a student should stand. Claire continued, "Mr. Hayes will be suspended pending a formal review of the altered safety sequence and the personnel decisions that kept Mr. Walker hidden from this company." Martin started to speak, but stopped when he realized there was no room left for a polished excuse. Claire faced Ethan again. "I would like you to return, not as maintenance support, but as head of human safety systems. Full authority to pause any demo, delay any launch, and protect any patient-facing technology that is not ready." The offer settled over Ethan like sunlight he had forgotten could be warm. He did not answer right away. He looked down at Abigail, who still held the cardboard box against her chest as if it contained not papers, but the proof that her father had never been small. "Daddy," she whispered, "they know now." Ethan knelt beside her, the same way he had in the corridor when the lie had tried to reach her before the truth did. "I never needed them to know I was important," he said softly. "I needed you to know that being quiet does not mean being small." Abigail wrapped her arms around his neck, and for the first time that morning, Ethan closed his eyes and let himself breathe. Claire watched them, her expression changed by something deeper than business. When Ethan stood, he offered her a small nod. "If I take the job," he said, "the rule is simple. No applause before readiness." Claire nodded. "Agreed." Across the demo room, Astra 9 waited in calm green light. The experts did not crowd Ethan. They stood behind him with respect. The employees who had whispered now stood in silence. And as the morning settled over Bennett Robotics, the man who had been replaced by experts became the reason the experts remembered who they were.